Hey kids, it's Jurassic James, and Jurassic James looking at Avaceratops. So this is one you may have heard of, but it's only one model of it I'm aware of, and there's a reason why, I think, as far as popularity goes. But here we have the official scissors, Jurassic James. We're going to dive right in after we free the beast. So it is a part of the Epic Evolution, Danger Pack, Jurassic World, all the things. Yes. So now, looking at this animal first and foremost, it is a ceratopsian. Ceratopsian means horned lizard. That includes the horned dinosaurs. Now, that lineage starts, well, the ancestors that we can recognize of the horned dinosaurs really start in I would say, the early Jurassic in China. But the ceratopsians that we all know, the horns and frills, those only lived for 20 million years in the last part of the Cretaceous period. So they're very much latecomers in the dinosaur game. But again, once they arrive, they did it in style. Meaning that ceratopsians, huge diversification of species, different frills and crest structures, and we're trying to figure out how they're related to each other and how they grow up. Their ontogeny and such. So Avaceratops is important because, first of all, looking at this animal, my first interpretation looking at it is it looks like it's not done. It's a juvenile. It's a kid. It's like a kid. And interesting enough, yes, the holotype for the species is a juvenile, and so it did get its own genus. Holotype meaning it's the first specimen of or recognized by a species. So, for example, you find the first of a new species, that's the holotype usually, as long as it's a good enough specimen to be studied and compared by other specimen. And so, this guy, of course, is kind of in some ways kind of dubious in the sense that. Well, I'll explain more in a minute, but the idea is that it's a juvenile, it's different, so we can say it's a new species, but because it's a juvenile, it's understood that most juvenile animals in the same grouping look very similar. And I mean, you're saying a very raw example of this would be like, are you saying that a baby human and a baby chimp look very similar? I mean, skeletally, kind of, but the idea is that as every parent shakes their fist at the video, and I'll turn it off, yeah. But the idea is that looking at the ceratopsians or even the duckbills, their babies look very similar to other ones until they get to a certain age. They begin growing all the the structures. Now, an example of this could be a deer, an elk, a moose, which are all technically deer. Those guys, their babies look very similar, and they get older, they get more, they form their features that we can identify them as their species, right? Anyway, so this guy's found in a Judith Formation. I want to point out in Montana, about 75 million years ago. The first thing I want to point out with the hands or forelimbs is that you can kind of see that. Let me put them right there so you can see that. Can you see the hands? So what ceratopsians know this, in general, they have 5 digits. The first 3 usually have claws, and the second 2, depending on the species, may be smaller or reduced. So this one has the first 3 claws, and there's this 4th outer digit, and the 5th one often could be what we call a throat pinky. It could be in the skin, it could be reduced, and so on and so forth. So that's that general trait we see. With the feet, ceratopsians have 4 toes. And so the idea is that you have 4 toes, and often will actually be like this. And again, this will be longer. And so that's correct. The hands I'm not sure about, but overall it's not a crisis. It's given this kind of literal like razorback, like a razorback turtle. That's kind of just neat as far as storytelling. I don't know. But again, looking at where it fits in the fossil record, the Judith Formation is the Campanian. So the Campanian, about 75 million years ago, there's a lot of dinosaurs there. So it's before T-Rex, and the Maastrichtian, and Triceratops, and Edmontosaurus, but it's like after the early Cretaceous, like in the late Cretaceous, Spinosaurus and Giganosaurus. So the 2 times before the Campanian are actually pretty dinosaur poor. It's like let me explain it this way. So, like for the beginning of the late Cretaceous, about 100 million years ago, we have a lot of dinosaurs all over the world. But then the next 2 times, two epochs, and again, I'll put a link to my time scale. You'll see there's very few dinosaurs. In the Campanian, it explodes, and there's so many species. And so, obviously, I think it's a fossil bias, in my opinion, that to me with the environments you have, you don't go from having very few dinosaurs to having all the dinosaurs. There's probably some kind of thing with the fossils that are not being preserved, or the rocks aren't exposed to show that age range. But where it lives in the Campanian, in the Montana Judith River, its top predators would have been the Daspletosaurus and the Gorgosaurus. The Spinosaurus, this one is a 2021 Safari, which I bought from Dinosaur Park in Bastrop. I'll always put their contact information below if you want to order from them. This is a Papagosaurus. These two Tyrannosaurs are the main predator for this animal. Its contemporaries would have been, non-ceratopsian contemporaries would have been Corythosaurus, basically. Other duckbills that are not quite decided upon, Monocleus, which is this is a Dino Rider figure from like the 80s. But it's the only example of this toy of this species, so here it is that I have. The Corythosaurus is a 2001 Carnegie, which is now Safari. So next we have Mercuryceratops from Collect A, this guy here, 2016, and of course Casmosaurus, which has like the most horns of any ceratopsian because of the frill here. And this one's a Collect A 2012, and this is of course a Jurassic World one. So these two would have lived in the exact same time, exact same place, so they're neighbors. And of course the other non-ceratopsians or ornithopods would be the Edmontonia, the St. Colosaur, a Notosaur with no club and spikes in the front, and our small theropods of a Troodon and a Ornithomimus. Troodon being the walking with dinosaurs, the talking version Troodon figure, which the name Troodon's being thrown out because they're breaking into different genuses. And this Ornithomimus, remember the Gallimimus from Jurassic Park, the ones flocking in the field? It's that kind of animal, but smaller, from North America. So these guys would have been the animals that Avaceratops would have lived with, seen, interacted with on this time on the Earth. Now, I mentioned earlier that Avaceratops is a juvenile, the holotypic juvenile. They found a specimen that was an adult, but they can't quite tie it together because juveniles and adults don't always look like each other. Its closest relative, though, that we can tie it to is an animal called Nasutoceratops, which was made famous by the newest, one of the Jurassic World movies. So here's the Jurassic World one, which is kind of rare to find now. And here is the 2015 Safari. This one actually is fun because I had one of these at the museum when I was teaching, and it went missing. And I sent a very kind, not mean, letter to my people. I said, hey, I don't have any hard feelings. This is a very important figure to me. Could you just return it, please, you know? And it never came back. But some people, a family called the Vanderpools, Nate, my students, he and his mother got one for me to replace it. So this is very special to me for that reason. And so, given the shape, like these are centrosaurians. So centrosaurians are, I have a whole video on ceratopsians, how they're different, they break down. But they usually have more rounded frills and like bigger, and their face horns, they don't usually have 3 horns usually. And so the idea here is that this guy, you can see where superficially this is probably related to each other. But the problem with Avaceratops, the biggest problem is, because it's a juvenile, it's hard to tell, because sometimes something will be named like 100 years ago, and then we'll get more specimen, more information. Go, okay, this isn't working out. The name is no longer good, right? Avaceratops is a specimen. We have it. It's there, and so we know it's a juvenile based on this growth and how the bones look on the inside. And so, and its size, it's only 2 meters. So this animal was as tall as this table. I mean, I know you can't quite see, like, how do you know I'm not on some giant stilt? Like, this camera's like above, I don't know. But it's real life. It's a table. And so, it's not, there's enough of it to say, yes, it's a thing. We can't question that. But not enough of it to determine whose juvenile it is. And so, it's one of those things where we would have to find more specimen of this animal, or its relatives, or its actual immediate genus relatives, and to have a growth series, because some dinosaurs, some horned dinosaurs, we have, like Triceratops, we have a growth series. We have babies and subadults and teenagers and all that. We can compare how they grow over time, because Triceratops in particular has a very dominant. It's not sharing this environment with a whole lot of ceratopsians. It's just a few, and so we can see, okay, it's a Triceratops. We can see how they grow. But Avaceratops, because there's so many other ceratops in the environment, and because it is a juvenile, we can't quite fit in whose kid it is. And so I refer to it often, not playfully, but just because, as a missing child's report, because we're not sure where it fits in and where. So the only way to really fix that would be either A, some futuristic way of scanning fossils and understanding things, which I don't know today, or 2, we just find more specimen that match this guy's features and can be said, okay, this is the line it's going into. Until then, it's kind of this weird like bubble by itself. Will I still take a picture of this to put on my website? You betcha. I will still label it and everything, but again, we don't know until we have more. And so that's one of the things in paleontology that people say, well, what do you always wonder? So I spend all my time talking about the basics, like here's these general concepts and families and diets and geology and geography. But something like that, it's like it's an unknown, it's an unsolved mystery. Back when I was a kids, there was a show called Unsolved Mysteries where they just explained mysteries that were not solved, as the name clearly, aptly labeled and implied. And so in paleontology, there's many unsolved mysteries. And so normally I can't talk about them because there are no toys of them. But Jurassic Park Epic Evolution is making all these random species, so now I get to bring this to you instead of just drawing something on a whiteboard. And so anyway, that's Avaceratops in a nutshell. I hope you appreciate the animal. It's really neat in my opinion. I think it's kind of cool. That's not a good endorsement. I think it's kind of cool. I think it's pretty cool. Anyway, I wasn't much better. I'll see you guys later. Thank you for tuning in.